Hello, everyone. This is Alisha with the Enlightened Souls Paranormal. And tonight is going to be the very first Paranormal History podcast with your host, me. So I have picked out a topic. We're going to travel all the way back to ancient times. And I have an article that I'm going to read. And we're going to go over and discuss some things. If you have any questions or comments, please post them in the chat. I'll pull them up and we'll talk about it together. So I'm excited. Sorry about the no sound in that first video I created. I don't know what happened there. So I'm going to go over and see who's all in the chat here. I already know that Adam is here tonight. Hi, Adam. Hope you're doing good, and I hope your investigation went well. And oh, thank you, Adam. Yeah, I gotta get that watermark off of there and figure out what happened to my sound. Hey, Victor, how are you? Hey, Deb. Hope you had a good time at your investigation. And Tammy, of course. Hey, Tammy. I decided today for kind of like the Mother's Day special, starting the Paranormal History podcast. So that's what I'm doing. I'm glad you're doing well, Victor. Much love. All right. So without further ado, I have picked out our very first topic for the very first Paranormal History podcast. And we are traveling back, all the way back where everything started with the paranormal. So let me pull up the article here. I also do not own any rights to any of these articles that I will be showing with you guys today. Please let me know if this is if you guys are able to see this before I go ahead and start. Do I need to blow this up more? And I forgot to mute my phone, so I apologize. 1 second here. That a little bit better? Okay. I'm just going to leave it right there at the 110, zoom in. You're blind? Me too. It's okay. How about one more, Victor? I don't know if it's too big for the screen. How's that looking now? Alrighty. Let's get started, shall we? So let's go back to like the very first time people started discussing ghosts. So I found this on worldhistory.org/ghost, which I do not own any rights to once more. So this is about ghosts in the ancient world. And I'll bounce back and forth between the article and the chats. If you guys have any questions or comments, please post them. I will bring them up and be checking periodically, and we can discuss. A belief in an afterlife was central to every major civilization of the ancient world, and this encouraged the recognition of the reality of ghosts as the spirits of the departed who, for one reason or another, either returned from the realm of the dead or refused to leave the land of the living. To the people of the ancient world, there was no doubt that the soul of a human being survived bodily death. Whatever an individual's personal views were on the subject, culturally, they were brought up with the understanding that the dead lived on in another form that still required some kind of sustenance. In an afterlife that was largely dictated by several factors. So these are the kinds of things that they're saying back then would have caused a person to not cross over. So they're saying the kind of life that they had lived on Earth. So whatever they did, were they, very bad person? Did they cheat, lie, steal? Did they kill? Um, and then they're saying how their remains were disposed of at their death. So an example I can give is, say we had a residential case that we had where this man, his wish was to be buried naked, and his wish was not honored, and therefore that resulted in his spirit becoming at unrest and him still haunting the place that he used to live at, or a murder and them just dumping their body or whatnot. So that's another one. And or how they were remembered by the living. So with that being said, my way of thinking with that would be like holding on to someone so tightly, like all the personal belongings, like keeping all those things, like keeping them in the same spot, or untouching them, like keeping them perfectly preserved, off, like constantly thinking about them, talking about them, just all that stuff. I feel like would hold a spirit back. I'm gonna go over to the chat, see if I got any comments yet. Any comments so far, guys? Questions? All right, I'm going to move on then. To the people of the ancient world, there was no doubt that the soul of a human. Oh, I already read that. Anyways. Okay. The details of the afterlife in different cultures varied, but the constants were such that such a realm existed, that it was governed by the immutable laws, and the souls of the dead would remain there unless given license by the gods to return to the land of the living for some specific reason. These reasons could include improper funeral rites, lack of any kind of burial, death by drowning where the body was not recovered, murder in which the body was never found and so never properly buried, or to resolve some unfinished business, or provide a true account of all the events surrounding their death, such as when one was murdered and needed one's death avenged, and the murderer brought to justice in order to rest in peace. So this is what their beliefs back then are still the same beliefs that we have today in the paranormal field, honestly. All right, next paragraph. The appearance of ghosts of the departed, even those of loved ones, was rarely considered a welcome experience. The dead were supposed to remain in their own land and were not expected to cross back over to the world of the living. When such an event did occur, it was a sure sight that something was terribly wrong, and those who experienced the spiritual encounter were expected to take care of the problem in order for the ghost to return to its proper place, which is kind of like where we would come in. This understanding was so prevalent that ghost stories can be found with very similar themes in the ancient cultures of Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, Rome, China, and India, as excuse me, as well as regions of Mesoamerica and the Celtic lands of Ireland and Scotland. Ghosts are also depicted in the Bible in much the same way as they were in earlier Roman works. So that's interesting. I did not know that. The following is by no means a comprehensive treatment of the subject. Many books have been written on the belief in ghosts in each of the cultures that are mentioned, and the many that are not. The purpose of this article is to merely to provide readers with the basic concepts of the afterlife and the belief in ghosts in the ancient world. Hop over to the comments. No comments. So we're going to keep rolling. All right, we're going to talk about ghosts in Mesopotamia. In Mesopotamian culture, death was the final act of life from which there was no return. The land of the dead was known by many names. Among them was the Urkala, the realm beneath the earth, known as the land of no return, where the souls of the dead dwelt in a dreary darkness, fed off dirt, and sipped from mud puddles. Though there were other visions of the afterlife, such as that expressed in the work Gilgamesh, Enkidu, and the Netherworld. And there's a little quote here. Ghosts could appear to people on earth to right some kind of wrong. Now let's go to the next paragraph here. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm hopping back over to the comments. Dude, I didn't know that either. So that's something, if you're interested in looking into. I don't know where at exactly. All right. This existence was the final end for all the living, no matter how great or poor a life they had lived. And it was ruled over by the Dark Queen, Ereshkigal. No soul was permitted to leave Urkla for any reason, not even a goddess, and exemplified in the poem The Descent of Inanna, in which even the Queen of Heaven and Ereshkigal's sister, Inanna, must find a substitute to take her place when she ascends back to the world of the living. Special dispensation, sorry, can't read, however, was given to souls who needed to complete some kind of mission. Ghosts could appear to people on Earth if they thought if it was thought that they needed to right some kind of wrong. So they're saying if they like stole, cheated, lied, like committed murder or something in like their life, that they would be able to go back and try to make up that wrong. What I'm getting. Here's a Mesopotamian statue. I don't know if you guys want me to leave that up there for a few minutes. Check that out. All right, moving along. Okay, so the statue is the Queen of the Night, or Bernie's relief, Mesopotamia. Okay, so these appearances usually manifested themselves in some kind of sickness among the living, the scholar Robert D. Biggs writes. The dead, especially dead relatives, might also trouble the living, particularly if family obligations to supply offerings to the dead were neglected, especially likely to return the trouble the living were ghosts of persons who died unnatural deaths or were not properly buried. For example, death by drowning or death on a battlefield. Excuse me. The doctors of Mesopotamia, known as the Astu and Astipu, employed spells that would placate the ghost, but before such treatment could begin, the doctor would ask the patient to honestly confess any sins that could have called the ghost forth from the underworld. Sickness in Mesopotamia was considered an outward manifestation of some sin that was being punished either by the gods or by the spirits of the departed, and was always assumed to be the fault of the one who was ill until it was proven otherwise. Any comments on that? I don't like that movie, The Crow, with a spirit coming back to fix the wrongdoing. I haven't seen that. All right, we're going to move forward if there is no comments or questions. Upon one's death, a spiritual entity known as Yidam was created, which maintained the personal identity of the deceased and traveled onto the land of the dead. It was this Giddim that would return to haunt the living if proper attention had not been paid to funeral rites and burial, or if there had been some unlawful act involved in the person's death. Inscriptions to do Inscriptions do make clear, however, that sometimes the Giddim could mischievously slip out of Urkula for visits to the earth, where they would harass the living for no good reason. So Giddim to me sounds like it's just another word for ghost, or it could be something more dark, like they say, or demons and stuff. That where they say where they would harass the living for no good reason, and they usually just like to stir up trouble. And if you're just joining, we are reading, and I'm reading over an article about ghosts of the ancient times, and we are talking about the Mesopotamian right now. Mesopotamia. All right. Next paragraph here. These spirits would be punished by the sun god Shamash by having their funerary offerings taken from them and awarded to Giddim, who had no one to remember them on earth, and so no one to provide them with offerings for their continued existence. Although there are records of loved ones returning from the afterlife with warnings or advice, most of these ghosts of Mesopotamia were unwelcome guests who were sent back to their realm through the use of charms, amulets, prayers, or exorcism. That's interesting. So, kind of like our team, we do cleansings and we close portals off, and we do prayer and we wear our crystals and stuff like that. Pretty much what the Mesopotamian did. Or a jinn, yeah. Yep, jinn mess around with people a lot. And for those of you that don't know, a jinn is a genie. There are genies here on this world, whether you choose to believe it or not. Look it up, guys. All right, next topic, Egyptian ghosts. I'll read the comment over here, the little quote. The living who were harassed by the ghost would have to plead their case directly to the returned spirit in hopes of a reasonable response. Kind of sounds like the Christmas Carol. It reminds me of a little bit. It's not a joking matter, but it's fun to have fun. All right. In ancient Egypt, the return of a ghost was also considered a very serious matter. For the Egyptians, non existence was an intolerable concept, and it was believed that at death, the soul traveled to the Hall of Truth, where it was judged by Osiris and the 42 judges by having its heart weighed in balance with the white feather of truth. If the heart was found lighter than the feather, the soul proceeded on to the afterlife, while if it was heavier, it was thrown to the floor where it was eaten by a monster and the soul would cease to exist. That's crazy. One's heart would be lighter if one had lived a good life, and heavier if one had not. The afterlife was known as the Field of Reeds, which was a mirror image of one's life on earth in Egypt. One would enjoy the house one knew, the stream by that house, one's favorite tree and dog, and so there was no reason for a soul to want to return to earth unless the soul had a very good reason for doing so. Here's a statue. This is Egyptian god Osiris depicted here in the statue, the one that judges for the Egyptians to cross. That who thing with the weighing of the heart and feather, I wonder if the kings and queens had done that to them. Who knows? In the earlier period of Egypt, the soul was considered a single entity known as the Ku, the immortal aspect of an individual. In later times, the soul was thought to be comprised of five different components. Two of these components, the Ba and Ka, spirit and personality, came together after death in one form of the Ka. And it was this entity that would return as a ghost if proper rites had not been observed in burial or some sin had been committed by the living, either before or after the person's death. The Aka was given dispensation by the gods to return to the earth to redress the wrong. So once again, like the Mesopotamians, they believed that, if you did something wrong, murdered somebody, stole, lied, cheated, they had to make that right. So in the Egyptian beliefs was the same thing pretty much, but different gods and stuff. And they called the spirits the Aka, is what would be a ghost, I guess. The living who were harassed by the ghost would have to plead their case directly to the returned spirit in hopes of a reasonable response. And if that wasn't effective, would need to have a priest intervene and judge between the living and the dead. An example of this would be how, when misfortune fell upon a widower, it was first attributed to some sin he had hidden from his wife that she, now all knowing in the field of reeds, was punishing him for. In a letter from a widower to his dead wife, found in a tomb from the New Kingdom, the man pleads with the spirit of his wife to leave him alone, as he is innocent of any wrongdoing. Hi, Mason. Doing my first paranormal history podcast. Our topic is Ghosts in the Ancient World. And so right now I am over reading the Egyptian part of the history. All right, let's see here. What wicked things have I done to thee? Okay, so this is that letter or whatnot, is what this man was pleading to his wife's spirit that came back to haunt him. What wicked things, what wicked thing have I done to thee that I should have come to this evil pass? What have I done to thee? But what thou hast done to me is to have laid hands on me, although I had nothing wicked to thee. From the time I lived with thee as thy husband down to today, what have I done to thee that I need to hide? When thou didst sicken of the illness which thou hadst, I caused a master physician to be fetched. I spent 8 months without eating and drinking like a man. I wept exceedingly together with my household in front of my street quarter. I gave linen clothes to wrap thee, and left no benefit undone that had to be performed for thee. And now behold, I have spent 3 years alone without entering into a house, though it is not right that one like me should have to do it. This have I done for thy sake, but behold, thou dost not know good from bad. Nardo 32. Oh my God, Mason. You're funny. So pretty much they got to deal with the sins of their past loved ones. Yeah. So to me, maybe it was the wife that had done something wrong, and that's why she actually came back. So maybe they got it wrong, because that's how it is with the paranormal as we know it now. Is the person that had done something wrong in their living life, they come back and they try to find redemption to cross over. So maybe they got it backwards. Tammy has a comment. We still work on the sons of our ancestors. They are passed down over many generations. We still work with the sins of our ancestors. They're passed down over many generations, she says. Yeah, and I do believe that, because there's some things that I've noticed about my life, and you've even mentioned it. It's a pattern. So from like my parents, there's a pattern there, down to me, there's a pattern. So hopefully it doesn't reach my kids. So we're going to continue here. If properly buried with adequate rites and continually remembered, the spirits of the dead would be of great benefit to the living and watch over them throughout their lives. There was a significant difference, however, in Egyptian understanding of a spirit who resided peacefully in the field of reeds and a ghost who returned to the earth. So, spirit, what we consider spirit is somebody's soul that is here uplifting us, guiding us the right direction, leaving us signs like, let me think of some example. Like, okay, think about something. So, like an animal, say your aunt or somebody that passed away, they liked a certain bird, like an owl, and then they keep seeing this owl, especially during the daytime. That's not a coincidence. That's their spirit guide. And then they're speaking of the ghost, which would be like the ones that are doing like hauntings. You're hearing voices, footsteps, knocks, being touched, stuff like that. Abuse, alcoholism, fear. Those are some of the sins Tammy's talking about. All right, let's continue, shall we? Ghosts in Greece and Rome. Let's go ahead and read this little quote here. Ghosts in ancient Rome were understood to appear in certain predictable ways and usually at certain times of the night. In ancient Greece, the afterlife consisted of three distinct realms. When one died, a coin would be placed in one's mouth to pay Charon, the ferryman, to take the soul across the river Styx. This coin wasn't payment exactly as much as a sign of respect between the soul and the gods. The greater the value of the coin, the better seat the soul got in Sharon's boat. Hope I'm saying that right. Once the soul was on the other side, one would pass by the three-headed dog Cerberus. I was going to say this all, Greek mythology. They depict this in a lot of movies, and here it is in world history. This is, on this website here. Once the soul was on the other side, one would pass by the three-headed dog Cerberus, and then stand before the three judges to give an account of the life one had lived. When the story had been told, and as the judges conferred, one would be given a cup of water from the river Lethe, the waters of forgetfulness, and would forget one's former life on earth. The judges would then assign the soul to a location. If you had been a warrior who died in battle, you went to the Elysian fields, which were a paradise. If you had been a good person, you went to the plain of Asphodel, also pleasant. If you had been a bad person, then you went to the darkness of Tartarus, where the soul remained until it had atoned for the sins of one's life. No soul was condemned to eternal damnation. The soul in Tartarus could become elevated to the plane of Asphodel in time. As in the cultures of Mesopotamia and Egypt, souls were not expected to return to Earth for any reason, but sometimes they still did. This same basic paradigm was adopted by the Roman culture, who held a much more deep-seated belief in ghosts than Greeks. So that would be them crossing over with Sharon, the ferryman, to meet the three judges here in the space. Oh, got a comment. That short text makes me think of how when people say you get a better paranormal activity when you are near water, limestone, and in times of a thunderstorm and other conditions, you need to try to give a spirit energy. Yeah. All right. In the comedy Mostellaria, The Haunted House, the Roman playwright Latus tells the story of how a rich Athenian merchant named Theopropides, sorry, I slaughtered that, goes away on business and leaves the operation of his home to his son, Philolaches. Philolaches sees his father's absence as an opportunity to enjoy life to the fullest instead of proving himself a responsible steward, and borrows a large sum of money to buy the freedom of a slave girl he loves. He then spends even more money to throw a grand party for his friends at his father's home. All is going well for Philolaches until his slave Tranio tells him he had just gotten word that Theopropides is returning unexpectedly from his trip and will be home soon. Philolaches panics, not knowing what to do with his guests or how he will explain this enormous expenses, but Tranio assures him all will be well. He locks Philolaches and his guest in a house and meets Theopropides outside, telling him that he cannot enter because the house has been found to be haunted. He tells Theopropides that a ghost appeared to Philolaches in a dream in the dead of the night while the torches were still lit, and informed him that he was murdered in the house long ago by his villainous host, who kills him for gold. Tranio further says that the corpse of the murdered man is still hidden in the house and it is dangerous for anyone to enter. Theopropides believes the story without question and despairs of where he will now live. A moneylender then shows up demanding payment on the loan Philolakis took out to buy the slave girl, and Tranio explains that this was done to buy the house next door. Oh, I see where they're going with this one. Tranio explains that this was done to buy the house next door since Theopropides' old home is now uninhabitable. Even when Theopropides goes next door and talks to Simo, the owner of the house, who denies that he sold it to Philolakis, Theopropides still shows no signs of doubting the ghost story. So here we have our very first ghost story, guys. I wish I could have been born back in them times. Super awesome and beautiful time. It would be super cool, dude. All right. Ghosts in ancient Rome were understood to appear in certain predictable ways and usually at certain times of the night. The historian D. Felton has noted that audiences who enjoyed Mossalaria would have found Tranio's haphazard ghost story hilarious because it departed from what people knew the truth of such a haunting would be. I'm going to pop up here really quick because I missed this quote. The improper burial of the dead was considered the prime reason for the return of a spirit from the afterlife. Once again, that's stated in almost all of these cultures here and now, obviously, in modern day paranormal. All right, so let's go back to the text here. The ghost of the murdered man would appear in a room lit by a torch, since ghosts could not be seen without some kind of light, but would not appear in a dream unless he was a friend or a loved one. And honestly, that actually people experience till this day. If it's someone close, I hear a lot of people talking about someone, a loved one that had passed away, coming to them in a dream. I actually had it happen myself. So back then, they believed this as well. Ghosts who appeared in dreams were considered a completely different kind of spirit than a restless ghost who had suffered an untimely or unjust death and had not been buried with the proper rites. In his haste to put together a story for the master of the house, Tranio confuses two separate types of ghost story, and Felton observes the ancient audience would have found this confusion funny. Um, do we want to watch this video? People who are watching? There's a video clip they have on here. My mouth's getting dry. All this talking. And I hope this isn't boring. I mean, if you love history, then this should be good for you. All right, we got one vote yes. Let's see some more votes here. Who wants to see this video clip here? I love history too. Exactly why I'm doing this. All right, we're going to play it then. Also, I do not own rights to this video.
Did you know a ghost is said to exist in Japan that drags you to hell through a toilet?
What?
Hello, and welcome to World History Encyclopedia. My name is Kelly, and today's video, in honor of Halloween and the spooky season, we're going to have a look at some of the stories and legends about ghosts from around the world. Don't forget, the easiest way to support us is by giving this video a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and hitting that bell icon for notifications so you don't miss out on any new uploads. World History Encyclopedia is a non-profit organisation, and we're now on Patreon. Patreon is a brilliant site that offers exclusive benefits to those who subscribe. Your support helps us create videos twice a week, so make sure to check it out via the pop-up in the top corner of the screen or via the Patreon link down below. The belief in an afterlife was a common feature in all historical civilizations, and this encouraged the belief in ghosts as the spirits of the departed who have returned to the realm of the living for one reason or another. Although the details of the afterlife differed from culture to culture, they all believed that the souls of the dead should stay in their realm unless given specific permission by the gods to return. The reasons a soul might be allowed to leave their realm included resolution of some unfinished business, revealing some important information, like the name of their killer or location of a will or their unburied body, improper or disrespectful burial rites, not being buried at all due to neglect by the family, or an inability to rest in peace because they were no longer properly honoured. Their tomb had become neglected, or in some cases, because of some crime they had committed and they were forced to atone for or self-condemned to repeat. It was generally considered a bad sign if a ghost turned up, and the person who encountered the ghost would be expected to take care of the problem so the spirit could return to its own realm. Now that you know the basic beliefs of ghosts in the ancient world, let's have a look at some of the ghost stories that have come down to us. Let's start off with what is known as an Egyptian ghost story, or Khonsemhab and the Ghost. The story dates to the late New Kingdom between circa 1570 and 1069 BCE, and it was found on fragments of ostraca, which are sherds of pottery with writing on them. After a fragmentary introduction, the story begins with Khonsemhab, the high priest of Amun, returning to his house and calling upon a spirit he has met to identify himself. The ghost reveals himself as Nebu Semek, who was a lieutenant in the army and the overseer of the treasury of King Mentuhotep. Nebu Semek tells Khonsemhab that his tomb has fallen, no one remembers where he is buried, and the proper offerings are no longer brought to him. Nebu Semek says he is exposed in the wintry wind, hungry without food, and he is worried he will cease to exist because he is no longer remembered. Khonsemhab says that he will do everything he can to build Nebu Semek a new sepulchre, but the ghost is skeptical because 4 other people have made the same promise to no avail. And it seems that Khonsemhab does not have the resources available to provide him with the tomb he once had. Nebu Semek disappears, but Khonsemhab does not forget his promise and sends men out to find the ruined tomb. When they return to Khonsemhab with the news that they found it, they celebrated, and Khonsemhab summoned an official to tell him news of the project. The story ends with the line, "He returned in the evening to sleep in the Neh, and he," but the rest of the tale is lost. Neh is the necropolis at Thebes, and it's thought that Khonsemhab returns to where he was at the beginning of the tale, which is fragmentary, to tell Nebu Semek the news of his new home. Our next story comes from a Chinese book of stories dating to 1680 CE, the story of Ning Kai Cheng and Ni Xiao Chen, although the story is thought to be much older. In the story, Ning visits a temple where he is met by the ghost of the maiden Ni. She tries to seduce him, but she fails as he resists her through his practice of virtuous conduct. The next morning, 2 other travelers who visited the temple are found dead with holes in the soles of their feet, drained of blood. Ni respected Ning's virtue in resisting her, so she tells him how she died in the temple at only 18 years old, but because she was buried in an area where a monster demon reigned, she was under his control. She was made to seduce travelers and drain their blood in order to feed the monster demon. Ning digs up the bones of Ni and reburies her near his house, performing libations as a sign of honor and respect. Because of Ning's virtue and his efforts in giving her the proper funerary rites, Ni is brought back to life and they marry, have kids, and live happily ever after. La Llorona is a spirit deeply embedded in the folklore and culture of Mexico, with her name translating to the Weeping Woman. She is described as a beautiful woman with long dark hair and a tattered white dress, who haunts bodies of water, wailing and dragging children to their watery deaths. There are a number of regional origin stories for La Llorona, but the most popular is that a peasant woman named Maria fell in love with a noble and had two children with him. However, her husband didn't appreciate all Maria did for him. He returned to his old ways of drinking and flirting, and one night she spotted him kissing another woman. In a fit of rage, she grabbed her children and drowned them in the river, and then let herself be drowned too. Her restless spirit stayed on earth, wailing for her children and luring other living children to be drowned. La Llorona is an example of the water spirit or water demon who appears in many different cultures and snatches children for their own reasons. In the case of La Llorona, she seems to be a self condemned spirit, forever searching for the children she murdered while killing others she mistakes for her own over and over again. One of the most famous sites in India that is believed to be haunted is Bangar Fort in Rajasthan, whose legend begins when the city was built in the 1500s Mughal Empire. It was a prosperous city until a nearby hermit cursed it. In one version, the hermit was a wise man who gave his blessing to the building of the city as long as they didn't build houses so high that they cast a shadow onto his hillside home. The original builders accepted his condition, but later it was forgotten, and the palace was built so high it loomed over the hermit's house, casting it in shadow. The hermit cursed the city for their lack of consideration, and the upper floors of the buildings were destroyed in a single night. Anyone who survived left Bangor Fort and built a new city nearby. The other version of the story involves the evil wizard Baba Balnath, who was in love with the beautiful princess Ratnavi, but he knew she would never love him back. To fix his problem, the wizard concocted a love potion that would attract the princess to him and disguised it as a perfume which he presented to her in the market one day. The princess had a suspicion that it wasn't just perfume, so she tipped it on a boulder, which was then magically drawn to the wizard and crushed him. As he was dying, the wizard cursed the princess and the city, and he swore that no one would live inside its walls afterwards. So, in one night, the city was deserted and never inhabited by the living again. It is still believed that the dead reside in Bangar Fort, and there are claims of voices, disembodied laughter, and footsteps in its ruins. The Indian government has declared the site off limits between dusk and dawn because of reports of people disappearing there and allegedly being taken by ghosts. A classic story comes from Pliny the Younger, who lived between 61 and 115 CE, and tells the story of Athenodorus, who comes to Athens and hears that there's a house being rented out for cheap because everyone is so afraid of the ghost who haunts it. Athenodorus rents the house, and on the first night in the haunted house, he hears the rattling of chains and wakes to find a man in his room who motions for Athenodorus to rise and follow him. So Athenodorus gets up and follows the ghost to a spot in the house's courtyard where the spirit just vanishes. The next day, Athenodorus has the city's magistrate dig where the ghost led him, and the body of a man wrapped in chains is found. After the body is reburied with proper funerary rites, the house is haunted no longer. Pliny's story epitomizes the ghost with a mission theme, where a spirit returns to demand proper burial of its corpse. Moving now to Rome, we have the tale of Tlepolemus's ghost, which is the same sort of tale, except here the ghost with a mission returns to identify its murderer. The story begins when a man named Thrasyllus murders his best friend Tlepolemus while they were out hunting because he's fallen in love with Tlepolemus's wife. The spirit of Tlepolemus appears in his wife's dreams and tells her how he was murdered and by whom, and asks that she avenge him. Thrasyllus had asked Tlepolemus's widow if he could court her, but she declined, saying that she was still in mourning over her husband. He asks again, and now, after her dream, she says that he can come and visit her that night. When he arrives, she offers him wine, which she has drugged, and he falls unconscious. She uses her hairpin to blind him, saying that death is too easy a punishment, and now he has to wander through life without eyes. as blind now physically as he was before spiritually when he killed her husband. She then runs to her husband's tomb, tells everyone of Thrasyllus's crime, and kills herself with a sword. Thrasyllus then seals himself up into Tlepolemus's tomb and dies of starvation. This story epitomizes the concept of justice from beyond the grave, which some ghosts were thought to administer, especially the ghost of a loved one who appeared in a dream. Modern day ghost stories follow the same model as those of the past, in which a spirit returns to right a wrong, avenge its death, or harm the living because of how the person died, which has made it impossible to rest in peace. A well-known ghost story in modern-day Japan is that of Hanako-san, or Toire no Hanako-san, which translates to Hanako of the toilet, who is believed to haunt the third toilet stall on the third floor of school bathrooms. Hanako-san is described as a young girl with a black bob and wearing a school uniform with a red skirt. One origin story for Hanako-san is during World War II, a bomb was dropped while she was in the bathroom, and she was killed. And now she haunts school bathrooms, caught between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Other origin stories for Hanako-san are that she was killed by an abusive parent or stranger in a toilet, or that she was committed suicide in a bathroom. Much like the legend of Bloody Mary, popular in the West, where you summon Mary's spirit in a bathroom, Hanako-san is said to appear if you knock on the door of her stall 3 times while saying her name, and then asking if she is there. If she is, she will reply, and depending on the story, sometimes a ghostly or bloody hand will appear, or Hanako-san herself will appear and drag you into the toilet, which may lead to hell. This figure, like Bloody Mary, is especially interesting in that the living must summon the spirit, which then injures or kills them. The threat of physical or spiritual harm, or even death, is a major aspect of these figures, and others, such as Midnight Man, and is regarded as an expression of people's fear of ghosts and the unknown, coupled with their desire to interact with the afterlife, to have proof of life after death, which is the primary purpose the figure of the ghost has offered the living throughout recorded history. Do you have a favorite ghost story? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on our new videos every Tuesday and Friday. This video was brought to you by World History Encyclopedia.
Guys, I forgot a special host. Hold on 1 second. I forgot my host. Here's Kelsey, guys. And I apologize, Kelsey. I forgot to bring you on. I need to get her own little seat. So this is an example of unfinished business. She was a stillborn. We found out of my daughter's sister, would have been sister. She was a stillborn. She died inside her mother's womb. And she spent lots of time over at her great grandmother's house where this doll was. And she took a liking to the doll, and she stays inside the doll now. So we have had activity from her. She does like to, I hear her voice, and my husband now is acknowledging that he is hearing a children's voice speaking, and it's not either of our children. Thanks, Mason. So what did you guys think of the video? Any comments, questions? Yeah, it was pretty interesting. And they brought up La Llorona, and I have seen that movie too. They made a movie on it. All right. I am going to keep this layout so you guys can actually see my face for once. And I'm going to continue to read over. Good. Awesome. I hope I'm not boring you guys. Please tell me if there's anything I can do to improve these podcasts for paranormal history. So I'm going to go ahead and continue with the article that I had found, and we were on Rome. All right. An interesting departure from this paradigm is the story of the maiden Philenion, as told by Phlegon of Trias, 2nd century CE, and later by Proclus, 5th century CE, in which Plinian is married to one of Alexander the Great's generals, Craterus, and dies after 6 months of marriage. She is returned to life and visits a youth named Machates every night in his room at her parents' house. When she is discovered by her parents, she explains she was released from the underworld for a specific purpose and then dies a second time. The historian Kelly E. Shannon, among others, has pointed out the lengths Phlegon goes to authenticate his story, presenting it as a first-person account in the form of a letter relating an historical event which happened in a specific place. Amyphilus, sorry, I'm murdering these words, guys, these names, at a certain time during the reign of Philip II of Macedon, while being careful not to be so specific that a reader acquainted the history of that place in time would have reason to doubt it. Says Shannon writes, what a reader reasonably be expected to believe? What can a reader reasonably be expected to believe? Roman literature is filled with strange and unexplicable creatures, objects, and occurrences, from centaurs to ghostly apparitions to volcanic eruptions, and these are not confined to the world of myth. Accounts of the natural world often focus on phenomenon that may seem outlandish or impossible. Authors like Pliny the Elder present as true things that a rational modern audience would find it difficult or even impossible to take seriously. Sounds like, Bigfoot and fairies. Mason, that's in the chat, talking about fairies earlier to me. Stuff like that. This phenomenon, Shannon references were known to the Romans as mirabilia, wonders or miracles, and included talking beasts, incredibly tall spirit women, visions from gods and ghosts. Among the most famous of such mirabilia is the tale by Pliny the Younger, who tells the story of the philosopher Athenodorus, who comes to Athens and hears of a haunted house that is going chiefly because everyone is afraid of the ghost who haunts it. Athenodorus rents the house, and that night hears the rattling of chains and wakes to find a man in his room who motions that he should rise and come with him. Athenodorus follows the spirit to a spot in the courtyard of the house where the spirit suddenly vanishes. Check the comments real quick. The next day, Athenodorus has the city magistrate dig up the spot where they find the remains of a man entwined with chains. The body is buried with all the proper rites, and the house is no longer haunted. This story is typical of a haunting, in which a spirit appears to seek redress for a wrong. The improper burial of the dead or lack of any grave was considered the prime reason for the return of a spirit from the afterlife, even above a spirit's desire to have their death avenged. Now, I did want to bring up the case, another haunted spot that we have been to, which was Death Curve in Cambridge. So, as many of you have known, we talk about the Julia Markham murders a lot. and Julia Markham murdered her 7 children and killed herself. And so the bodies were so badly mutilated that all the children are buried in one unmarked grave, and Julia is buried right next to them. So they both have unmarked graves. And their spirits are left behind. Their spirits are still here. We have spoke with them, and we have talked about getting a tombstone, a headstone with all their names on it, so we can honor them so they're not feeling like they were forgotten about. So we're hoping, really hoping that that helps, and to be able to cross these children over. Hell yeah. So I'm going to go back and finish reading up. The next day, Athenodorus has, oh, I already read that part. Next. The possibility of a spirit returning to ask a loved one to avenge his or her death is illustrated in a tale told by Apuleius. Like I said, sorry, I'm murdering these words, these names, in which a man named Rastilus, oh yeah, she was just talking about that in the video. Rastilus falls in love with the wife of his friend Ptolemy. Okay, I think I got that right. And murders him while out hunting. Ptolemy's spirit appears to his wife in a dream, tells her how he died, and asks her to avenge him. Thrasylus has asked if he may court her, but she has denied his suit because she is still in mourning. She now says, however, that he may visit her that night. She offers him wine which is drugged, and once he falls into a stupor, she blinds him with her hairpin, claiming that death is too easy a punishment for what he has done, and he must now wander through life without seeing the world. She then runs to her husband's tomb, tells the story of his death, and kills herself with his sword. Thrasylus has himself shut up in Ptolemy's tomb and starves himself to death. Then these then were the two main ways an ancient audience understood ghosts to manifest themselves, though they were not the only modes of manifestation, either in dreams, which I do get those, visions in my dreams, or in physical appearances, and usually having to do with some problem surrounding their death. And this same paradigm is observed in other cultures. All right, now we're going to Ghosts in China and India. I'll read the quote here. During the Ghost Festival, people leave out food and gifts for the dead in the hope that they will remain in their own realm and not trouble the living. Kind of sounds like Cinco de Mayo a little bit. In Chinese culture, the spirit of a person who has drowned, died alone, died in battle, or suffered some other death where they went unburied would appear bodily and could only be seen at night by torchlight. The spirit of an ancestor who wished to relate some information or give a warning would appear in a dream. So, show of hands, how many of you have had a past relative come to you in your dream? And if you have, if you want to mention who they were, if you're comfortable doing that, post it in the chat. You know, actually, Adam, I never thought that it would happen because the person that had visited me, she actually was killed when I was in high school, middle school. Yeah, remember when. It was a long time ago. And this happened to me this year. And I can't believe it. It was just like I was in my dream. I was at this house. There's lots of dogs and people. It was like a get together party, and it was raining out. And I could hear her voice. She was upstairs at this dining room table, and she was laughing. And I seen her, and it felt so real. Like that's what we used to do when we would visit. We would just hang out and talk and have a good laugh, and it was awesome. My great aunt came to me and told me everything will work itself out. She comes to me every once in a while. That's awesome. You know what's funny is that that person that came to me was my great aunt as well. And I think that's kind of what she was saying too. I'm going to go ahead and continue with the article. Ghosts were considered a reality by the Chinese philosopher Mo Tai, who argued in favor of accepting the report of the ghost of the minister Tupo returning from the afterlife and assassinating Zhuan, the king of Zhao. He reasoned that when people tell of how a certain machine operates with which one is not acquainted, or how certain people behave or speak in a land they have never been to, one should accept what they say if their report seems credible and if they themselves seem reliable witnesses. So, kind of like reincarnation. Say I went to my home route, Scotland, and everything just kind of clicks and it makes sense to the locals, and they're seeing me, and I kind of like know the area and whatnot, and I've not been there. I don't know. That's how I'm taking it. All right. Following this line of reasoning, then one should accept what is said about ghosts if those who tell one about them can be trusted and what they have said about other things in life, one can verify oneself. As ancient historical accounts, as well as contemporary beliefs of his time, contained references to ghosts. They should be accepted as a reality in the same way one recognized established history and news reports of the day, even if one had not experienced the ghost oneself. The Chinese belief in ghosts was heavily influenced by their practice of ancestor worship and the belief that the departed continued to exert a powerful influence on people's lives. As in other cultures mentioned, the spirits of the dead could benefit the living unless there had been impropriety. I'm sorry, I can't even say that right now. Impropriety in burial or funeral rites, or the dead had been giving disposition from heaven to right a wrong. The Ghost Festival, which originated to honor and appease the dead, continues to be held on the 15th day of the 7th month of the year, known as the Ghost Month. This time is thought to be when the veil between the realm of the living and that of the dead is thinnest, and the dead can easily cross over, similar to the Celtic concept of Samhain and the Mesoamerican festival known as the Day of the Dead. During the Ghost Festival, people leave out food and gifts for the dead to appease and honor them in the hope that they will remain in their own realm and not trouble the living. The Chinese afterlife was thought of as a journey in which the soul had to cross a bridge over an abyss where it was judged. If the soul was found worthy, it continued on, paused at a pavilion to look back on the land of the living one last time, and then drank a cup of brew called Mengpo soup, which caused one to forget one's former life entirely. The ghost culture of China diverges at this point on what happens to the soul next. According to some works, the soul goes on to heaven, while according to others, it's reincarnated. And I believe in reincarnation, guys. I truly do. If the soul is found unworthy as it crosses the bridge to afterlife, it slips down into hell where it remains. Either case, the soul was not expected to return to the land of the living, and if one did, and it was not an ancestor appearing in a dream with some warning or advice, it was certain some kind of evil force was involved. This is exemplified in the story of Ning Kashing and Ni Zuhuan, the writer Pu Songling's book of the stories of 1680 CE. The story is thought to be much older than 17th century CE and tells the story of Ning's visit to a temple. I'm not going to read this, guys. We already watched that video, so let's scroll down. Chinese ghost stories often carry a moral along the lines of the legend of Ning and Ni and emphasize virtuous behavior and the kindness to others. Confucius believed in the efficacy of the ghost story because he felt the lessons learned from supernatural encounters could instill proper virtues in the living. He felt this was even true of encounters with so called hungry ghosts, which were spirits whose relatives had forgotten the duties of respect and remembrance of spirits, or spirits of those who had been murdered, but those killers had not been brought to justice. Hungry ghosts were thought to have received special dispensation from the gods to torment the living until they received their due. The hungry ghost could torment the mind of the living or inhabit the home and behave along the lines of the familiar poltergeist. This was also true in India, where the ghosts of the departed were seen as hungry ghosts. In ancient and modern India, ghosts were also known as bhoots, and they appeared as humans, but with backward feet, who could change their appearance without warning. The feet are thought to appear backwards to symbolize that something had gone wrong, that the spirit is in an unnatural state. Bhoots materialize when a person dies before their ordained time on earth. Since they were unable to enjoy the fullness of their lives, they return to the earth in hope of possessing their body of the body of some living person. Ghost possession, including the spirit reanimating their own corpse, was a great concern in ancient India, and some scholars maintain that this led to the practice of cremating the dead. If a body were cremated, the spirit could not return to reanimate it, and the burning of certain spices, along with the use of amulets and prayers, could protect the living from the spirit taking possession of them after it found it could not re-inhabit its dead body. Interesting. Good night, Adam. Thank you for watching. And I see that. All right. Since these spirits have died before their allotted time, they are very unhappy and usually angry. Ghosts were thought to cause multiple problems when they manifested themselves physically, but as in other cultures, were considered beneficial when they appeared in dreams and could be recognized as the spirit of someone the dreamer had known, especially a relative. A particularly dangerous boot was known as Churail, which was the spirit of a woman who had died in childbirth. The ghost was thought to be encountered at crossroads and intersections and would make advances of friendship to the living. If the living person was a woman, the Churail would seek to steal her children or try to possess her body, and if a man, it would seek to seduce and then kill him. Once the boot had lived out its allotted time on earth, even the Churail, it would leave and re enter the stream of reincarnation. The Indian belief in an afterlife involving the transmigration of souls dictated that the soul of the deceased was judged according to its acts while in the body and would move either up or down a spiritual hierarchy and in the next reincarnation. It would seem, however, that not every soul moved on, since there are stories involving haunted regions, houses, and even cities where the ghosts have been present for many centuries. The most famous of these sites is Bangor Fort in I can't say that, which is an abandoned city thought to be inhabited by ghosts. This city was built under the Mongol Empire in 1573 CE, and as the legend goes, was prosperous until cursed by a reclusive hermit who lived nearby. In one version of the history, this hermit was a wise man who gave his blessing to the building of the city on the condition that none of the houses rose so high as to cast a shadow on his hillside home and so block his sun. The original builders of the city respected his request, but later it was forgotten, and additions were made to the palace, which cast its shadow over the hermit's home. He cursed the city and its inhabitants for the lack of consideration, and in a single night, all the upper stories of the buildings were destroyed, and the people who served the then deserted Bangor Fort and built a new city of Bangor nearby. The other version of the story involves the beautiful princess. Sorry, lost the spot. We already watched this in that short clip. I'm going to skip down to conclusion. We've been going an hour, 21 minutes strong, and my mouth is starting to get a little parched. All right. Conclusion. Although the belief that the dead could return to Earth at All Souls Day persisted, it changed as the Christian vision of the afterlife became increasingly popular, and ghosts came to be linked with demons and the devil. Ghosts are mentioned in the Bible. Oh, here's that passage. I know Adam was curious about that in the Bible, and it didn't mention where it was at. But here it's saying ghosts are mentioned in the Bible in passages such as Matthew 14:25 to 27, Mark 6:48 to 50, and Luke 24:37, 39. Among the most famous passages concerning a ghost is the one from I Samuel 28:7 to 20, in which King Saul goes to the witch of the Endor and asks her to conjure the ghost of Samuel, his former advisor and a prophet of God. Saul is afterwards cut off from God's favor for choosing to consult a spirit about what he should do instead of trusting in God for his future. Ghosts, and especially conjuring spirits, came to be seen in a negative light as Christianity gained more adherents. The passage in Mark 6 has also been interpreted as a negative representation of ghosts, in that the disciples think that Jesus is a ghost when they see him walking on the water. Ghosts could not walk on water, only gods and those who were divine. And so when the disciples mistake Jesus for a ghost, it is thought to show their hardness of heart in receiving Jesus' message of salvation. The scholar Jason Robert Combs has noted how the writer of Mark knew that his audience would recognize the symbolism of the ghost. He writes, "Gods and divine men walk on water, ghosts do not. But when the disciples see Jesus walking on water, they believe the impossible rather than the obvious." Mark's insertion of this absurdity because they saw him walking on the sea, they thought he was a ghost, emphasizes in dramatic fashion the disciples' misconstrual of Jesus' messiahship. The author of Mark continually makes the point that the disciples failed to grasp who Jesus was and what his mission was about. His use of the ghost in his early book would have made this point clearly to an ancient audience. They would have recognized that a ghost cannot walk on water, and that further, water was often employed to ward off ghosts. The biblical book of I John 4:1 states that one should test all spirits to see if they are from God, and not believe that every spirit is what they appear to be. Yeah. This passage, coupled with the belief expressed in this passage from Mark and I Samuel and others, encouraged an even further negative view of ghosts than people had previously. Although ghosts had always been regarded as unwelcome and unnatural, they were now linked with the demonic and were seen as agents of the devil. People were encouraged to reject the reality of ghosts, since at death the soul of a person either went to heaven, hell, or purgatory, and they did not return to earth. If one saw a ghost, then one should assume it was a trick of the devil to snare one's soul for hell and causing them to doubt the divine order of God. The attitude towards ghosts is exploited for dramatic purposes in Shakespeare's Hamlet. When Prince Hamlet doubts that the ghost he has seen is actually his father returned from the dead and says, "The spirit that I have seen may be a devil, and the devil hath power to assume a pleasing shape. Yeah, and perhaps out of my weakness and my melancholy, as he is very potent with such spirits, abuses me to damn me." This view of ghosts completely altered the old understanding that ghosts were the souls of those who had died, and since they were of the devil, belief in them was discouraged. In time, a growing trust in a secular, more scientific way of viewing the world completed the work begun by the church and relegated ghosts to the realm of superstition and fiction, judging from the number of websites and books devoted to the subject. There are many in the modern day who are interested in the subject of ghosts, but generally speaking, the belief is not encouraged culturally, precisely the reverse situation of how ghosts were viewed in the ancient world. And it's getting a lot better. I feel like there's a lot more people out there that do believe, that want to believe, that honestly they're afraid to talk about what they've experienced because they don't want people to have that judgment towards them because of possibly their spiritualism, their Christians or whatever, and they don't want to be thought that they're crazy or called crazy. And that's where we come in. We're here to listen. So it's becoming more broadened, and there's a lot more people doing this. All right. Where was I at? This honestly pretty much sums it up, guys. So that was the first Paranormal History podcast with me as your host. I really hope that you all enjoyed this. And if there's any way I can make these podcasts better for you guys, more interactive, please let me know. I see another comment in here. I'm going to read that real quick. You have to have unshakable faith to walk on water. Yeah, that is, yeah, no, definitely. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up for the night. This was your Mother's Day special Paranormal History with Alisha from the Enlightened Souls Paranormal. And I hope you all had a wonderful Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all you mothers out there. And I hope you all have a wonderful night. We'll see you next time. Bye.